Hi everyone, my name is Stacy Acham and I'm the marketing manager here at Siegel Scientific. Today we're gonna present to you what's new in document management with BarTender Librarian. Just a little bit of housekeeping. This meeting is being recorded, so if you don't feel comfortable with participating or joining us today, you're welcome to log off and we'll send out a follow-up email with the webinar recording and slides. However, you will be on mute, so no need to worry about your face or your voice being recorded. And we will be taking questions today and answering them live at the end of the session. So go ahead and submit your questions in the questions pane. And then while you're at it, go ahead and opt in for our communications where you can get the latest alerts on products, what's new with us, webinars, etc. And then today's presenters are going to be our Senior Product Marketing Manager, Michael Leo, and our Solutions Consultant, Manny Castro. And if you can't hear us, just go ahead and check your audio settings. Again, you are on mute, but you should be able to hear us. Awesome. And I'm going to pass it off to my team member, Mike.
Great. Thank you, Stacy. Good morning or good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for taking the time to attend our webinar about Librarian and BarTender 2021. Let's take a quick look at our agenda. First, we'll be looking at the Librarian document management system and a number of new capabilities added in our latest BarTender 2021 software release. We'll then take a look at a typical user installation and assessing a current Librarian installation. And then we'll cover best practices and tips for updating Librarian as you update to BarTender 2021. And as Stacy mentioned, we will answer as many questions as we can with our remaining time. For this webinar, there's been some exciting news as we've just made available our latest software release, BarTender 2021, at the beginning of November. BarTender 2021 is still available in 4 editions: Enterprise, Automation, Professional, and Starter. Enterprise Edition is focused on businesses that have regulatory or compliance needs and includes advanced tools like our Librarian document management system, which we'll be covering today, as well as centralized printing and management for an entire organization across multiple locations. For Automation Edition, you now receive all the different automation options, including combining forms, actions, and system integrations. Professional Edition is primarily focused on connecting label designs to external databases and selecting or inputting data at print time through configurable data entry forms. The newest starter editions are entry-level offering for small businesses and departments who have simple label creation and printing needs. Note that each higher edition contains all the features of the editions below it. BarTender 2021 is compatible with the latest Windows version and still has a greatly simplified installation process that involves a single BarTender software program and a product license key code that you use to activate the BarTender software at the right edition level. Finally, the different BarTender 2021 editions are licensed by the number of printers used. Before we get started, let me quickly summarize why you should update to our latest software release, BarTender 2021. There are a couple of major reasons to update. First, 10.1 is end of life at the end of December 31st, 2020 this year. After December 31st, you will no longer be able to get technical support for it. Also, 10.1 is only compatible with Windows version 18.03, which was released in July of 2018. Even if the PC where BarTender is installed is not directly connected to the internet, it still could be a security risk by being on your company network, since it is on this older Windows version. The second reason for updating BarTender 2021 is the fact that BarTender 2021 provides a whole bunch of new capabilities in several areas, including intelligent templates, which allow you to produce a wide variety of flexible label document designs without having to create and maintain hundreds of separate documents. It allows you to more easily print multiple records within a single label or document by using a table object sourced from a database. BarTender 2021 allows you to create PDFs without any third-party driver. You can also remotely print from any web browser, from any laptop, PC, or device, iOS or Android phone, with the new print portal. And we've also made designing data entry forms in BarTender much easier and more intuitive, including easier database record and printer selection directly in the forms themselves. And finally, the new administration console replaces Security Center in 10.1, and it consolidates a number of features and capabilities, including user security, printer management, redirection and failover, BarTender license management, electronic signatures, and document encryption, and allows you to manage and deploy your integrations. We've also, for BarTender 2021, we've added many new database connection options, including Excel Online, Google Sheets, QuickBooks Online. It also supports Azure SQL databases, XML files, MySQL, and many others. And it also includes the ability to create your own database. In total, it supports over 20 different databases and data sources. BarTender 2021 also allows you to more easily print multiple records, and it also includes our powerful integration builder platform, which allows you to easily work with your existing business systems. It supports several different trigger methods and data formats, including XML, TCP/IP, and over 70 different action types. We also have a .NET SDK for even tighter integration with applications. Well, at this time, I'm going to turn the presentation over to Manny. He'll now give you some more details on our librarian document management application.
Thanks, Mike. Good morning, everyone. So we'll begin with what's new in document management with BarTender 2021 Librarian. And at the backbone to that, the BarTender system database. So a little review on that first, just so we're all up to speed on it. The BarTender system database is the central data storage for applications in the BarTender suite, and its use has significantly grown in the last few versions of BarTender. The BarTender system database allows you to store and review events occurring in your BarTender environment, such as warnings and error messages, information on each print job, including print driver version, data that has printed, and an image of the label that has printed. In addition to that, you can also reprint previously printed jobs. You can store templates and other files in your BarTender system database. That's where Librarian, our document management tool, comes in. By default, we always keep or save old revisions, allowing you to revert back at any point to an old revision of your file. You can build workflows that, when paired with the security profile, allow you to set who's allowed to put files into a certain state, such as only admins or power users can set a label to print on a production integration or in prod. You can now also have global data fields where a serial number or any value really can be shared across any label that you like. It's not just specific to a printer type, label size, or user or PC. The default BarTender system database uses Microsoft SQL Server Express 2014, which is free but has a 10 GB limit. Also, it does have to be Microsoft SQL Server for the BarTender system database. No other platform is supported. If you want multiple computers to share a centralized system database, or if you have a single computer logging a high volume of print jobs, you might want to use your own database instance and license of SQL so that you don't have to worry about that 10 GB restriction. Remember that if you need to have a central system database, you'll need an enterprise license. An automation license can only log to and use a local BarTender system database. And here at a very high level is what a deployment of BarTender Enterprise looks like. Note that each BarTender client has all the companion applications installed, meaning you can have all your servers and clients sharing a BarTender license, so to speak. And that's fine, of course, as we're licensed by printer. And you can have this configuration and just connect to a central license and a central system database. Now on to Librarian. The Librarian application of BarTender is a major part of our document management system. designed to provide a secure central repository for label templates and documents. Librarian lets a group of label designers, administrators, managers, and other users securely manage the centralized storage, development, and revision of bartender documents, such as labels and other related files, increasing collaboration. Librarian is particularly valuable in highly regulated or secure environments, such as the pharma, medical, military, or chemical industry. And with Librarian, organizations can create a centralized storage with all their bartender documents and manage them. They can establish workflows and predefine reviews and reviewers and approvals. Users can check in and check out documents as they work on them, so you assure only one user is editing a given file at a time. Of course, that only applies to editing, and concurrent printing of labels is fine. They have full revision control and audit trail with a full file history, and many of our customers have found that a label-specific document management system really helps with increased label quality and allows their teams to work more efficiently and accurately together. In BarTender 2021, you'll know a totally new experience when it comes to Librarian. We now have a user interface that allows you to build far more complex workflows. Based on the state of a file, based on the state that file is moved into or requested to be moved into, you can program specific actions occur. So this can include emailing the stakeholders or decision makers in the approval process. This message can be customized for each step in your workflow. You can require a group of people or any one person to approve an item to a given state, or if it's rejected, revert to a specific state. Once alerts have been sent out, the decision maker can then review and approve the request from either the email itself by clicking a link to your print portal page and reviewing it there, or do it in the email itself as mentioned, both of which do not require you to have BarTender installed. And of course, you can also just do it from Librarian itself. There's a specific section now in Librarian that allows you to review what documents are awaiting your approval. And as mentioned, this email notification can be customized on a per state basis. And similar to other applications in BarTender, variables can be used to make your messages contain dynamic and relevant data, or information rather. You can also now run multiple workflows. So this one was very popular for our pro services customers. We quite often came into circumstances where this was requested or required. So we're really excited to have that, and we'll be using that quite often in our service engagements. So the way that this works is you can now create multiple workflows using the new editor we mentioned. Then with rules, you can select what folder and even file type the new workflow applies to. So a way of putting it simply, we can create different folders for the different environments we have, then create the appropriate unique workflow for each environment. Finally, we can then, via the rules functionality, apply it to the correct folder. A file can then move through its lifecycle in one folder, and once ready, move to another folder where it will be subject to the workflow of that folder. And through this whole process, of course, you're keeping the revision history of that file. Overall, just a much more flexible and powerful document management tool.
This is awesome stuff, Manny. You know, and the new workflow designer, it looks really good and easy to use, but for someone who isn't sure about how to update, or, you know, someone on 10.1, how would you go about updating to BarTender 2021's Librarian?
Sure, right. I mean, that's usually the first step in that process, right? So with that, we begin with assessing our current deployment of BarTender. So regardless of whatever version you're coming from, that's going to be kind of your starting point. So let's go ahead and review a scenario that we have put together today. So in migrating Librarian, we're really wanting to migrate the BarTender system database effectively. That's where all our settings and files and workflows are stored. Is stored. So we'll need to keep that in mind as we go through this process and in migrating Librarian. So here's our scenario. We're running a BarTender version 10.1 instance, and then one thing to know is that this is the best practice for really any version of BarTender that you're coming from, really as far back as around 9, and I would say 9.2 when Librarian was released. So this applies not just to 10.1. So this deployment of BarTender has labels stored in Librarian, of course, as we mentioned. We're printing via Commander file integration on the side, and then also we have other clients out there, other BarTender clients that are printing on-demand labels. Of course, we're using the BarTender system database, the kind of backbone of this whole infrastructure. We're using that for Librarian, and we're also logging print job messages and statuses. Now, the idea behind this as well is to understand that we're not moving just Librarian over, so to speak, on its own. We're going to be moving over our whole print process. And the goal is to get this whole environment over to BarTender 2021. So we'll want to assess both the server and the client side and look for what files are being used first. In the case of labels, they will have a .btw extension, and they might be located once again on the server, on clients, or in Librarian. We'll cover how to migrate the system database in a moment. Just keep in mind that those files could exist elsewhere. So just because you're using Librarian doesn't mean that there couldn't be other files out there that some users, maybe against the rules or whatever, have decided to save elsewhere. So we want to gather the integration files as well. As mentioned, we're printing via Commander. So that Commander file, the task list, is going to include the settings of what folder we're monitoring, the trigger files, the extension of those files, and what data to anticipate in those files as well. We'll want to look for any databases or images that our labels may have as dependencies, things like Excel file, Access databases, etc. We'll want to, while most of these locations are personal preference, as mentioned, each user just kind of stores wherever they feel is best. There's no real restriction as far as where labels could be or could not be saved. Some tips, you might want to check the inet pub directory. If you're using WebPrint server, that's likely where those labels are stored. Your just documents folder in Windows. Lastly, another tip is to review your old Commander trigger files. If applicable to your scenario, of course, the Commander trigger file likely has a directory of where your labels are. And oftentimes that's where, when we go through these upgrades, that's kind of like where we look for a clue as far as where the location of some of these files are. And lastly, we'll want to know where are you logging to as far as your BarTender system database. So where is that located? So we'll want to identify that. And we'll want to take all our findings, and as usual, we'll want to make a list when performing an upgrade. So this is going to be a list of everything we need to effectively copy over. These will fall into a few different categories. They're either files and folders in Windows, Windows directories somewhere. This means that we need to copy and paste those. However, we can get those over from we'll copy them for now. We'll find out in a moment where we're pasting them to. They're printers, so we need to assess what printers we're using them, the naming convention, and be prepared to install them. Lastly, and most importantly for this webinar, is our BarTender system database, which of course, remember, while labels support connecting to different database platforms, the BarTender system database is going to be a SQL Server instance. So you can kind of narrow down your result as far as that goes. So we need to know where that's stored. Now, if we're not sure where the BarTender system database is located, if we're on BarTender 2016 and up, we can review and find that information in our administration console. If we're on BarTender 10.1 and prior, we can go to our start menu, all programs, BarTender system database wizard, and that wizard, including with allowing you to connect to a system database, will also tell you where your system database is located. And now we're going to follow the best practice, which is very similar and pretty much exactly what we do for all our pro services engagements when we're migrating and upgrading instances of the system database for customers, is we'll want to install Microsoft SQL Server Management Studio somewhere. So now this tool, if you're not familiar with it, allows you to connect and manage a SQL instance. It can be downloaded from Microsoft's website, and it is a free tool to use. So we're going to connect, once we have it installed, of course, right? We're going to open up the application and we're going to connect to the PC or server hosting our system database. We're then going to simply right-click our database. Once the database folder has been expanded, go to Tasks and Backup. We then want to select where we want to save our full backup. And then remember, we want that full backup. The product of this is going to be a .bak file. This is going to be the file that we import to our new SQL Server instance. You might also notice that BarTender has a built-in backup and restore function. We'll still want to use Microsoft SQL Server Management Studio instead of that tool, as that tool is designed for more of a disaster recovery scenario, where we're exporting and importing to the same version of BarTender, and you only need the logs migrated. As we need the full system database, including the Librarian files, our workflow, we're going to follow the best practice of using the Microsoft SQL Server Management Studio to get that export, that .bak file. Now, if you're using a central SQL server hosted on a non-bartender PC, kind of like a tip and something that we often use, commonly do, I should say rather, is you can just duplicate the system database there and connect to the duplicate from BarTender 2021, leaving your original intact.
Awesome. So I have a list and I think I have a good idea of how to back everything up, but can I leave my existing version running or do I need to, update?
Mhm. Right, and that's often, a common concern. And we do have kind of a best practice approach to that. Well, that's totally fine to install BarTender, a new version of BarTender over an older one. That's technically fine. We do suggest following the best practice of setting up a test environment. So here's why we go about doing it that way. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to get away from the scenario where you take down a validated production system. That's probably especially true when we're dealing with a solution that has Librarian deployed. So it's likely validated in that scenario, and replace it with an untested one. As with most BarTender deployments, there's a lot of moving parts, especially outside of BarTender at the network, application, or even hardware level. So we have to note that each BarTender deployment is a little bit different, and there's not kind of like a one size fits all as far as that's concerned. So we'll just want to make sure that all those moving pieces, not just BarTender, right, are tested and configured correctly. This especially applies if you're running any sort of integration or like in our scenario, right, where we're using that BarTender system database. We essentially want to do a systems check and validate to some degree our dev environment before we take down any prod system. So some items to consider. We need to make sure we have the correct installer. Thus, we want to make sure we go to the Siegel Scientific website and get the latest build of BarTender. This will prevent you from installing an older previously downloaded patch. Just make sure that you start from the most recent installer of the software. As we go through the installation, we'll immediately come across a decision to make. We need to activate. So now if you have purchased a new BarTender license outright, go ahead and just activate. If you're coming from BarTender 2019, note that you can have a BarTender 2021 license server and client BarTender 2019 instance, so there is backwards compatibility there. In essence, what you would end up with in that scenario is you'd have one test environment, one prod environment sharing a 2021 license. Lastly, if you have BarTender 2016 or prior, so all the way back to whatever version you're coming from, you can contact your sales rep for a BarTender 2021 trial so that you can validate your environment before actually making the switch over. Then we want to move on to installing our print drivers. Remember, for the most while not required, right, but for the most seamless upgrade, we want to make sure that we try to at least name the printers the same way as they were named on the old PC or server. Then we want to go ahead and copy over all our commander task lists, BarTender labels, databases, etc., all the files even that we found outside of Librarian. We'll want to pay attention to the folder structure that they're coming from. So depending on your ERP, your integration, or your scenario, nesting a file in a different folder structure will result in changes needed either on the BarTender side or maybe even external to BarTender. One last thing as well, pay attention or note what kind of user you'll be using to connect to the either new or migrated BarTender system database. From my experience, usually SQL users work best. That's just kind of like the most long-term best solution that we do for our deployments and our projects that we do. However, SQL and Windows authentication is supported still. And whichever route you go, just want to know and make sure that whatever user you are going to be setting this up with has permission to your Microsoft SQL server. Once installed and activated, and our printers are installed and our files are copied over, we'll want to bring over our backed up system database. For this, once again, we'll be using SQL Server Management Studio, either the same instance to connect to a different PC or a new instance on that server. We want to connect to the server that's going to be hosting our BarTender system database. We then want to navigate to the databases folder on the right. We're going to click on Restore Database and restore or import the full backup we did of the previous system database. And what my SQL Server Management Studio is going to be looking for there is going to be that .bak file that we backed up, right? So once again, this applies to any recent version of BarTender, really as far back as 9.2 when Librarian came out. Once that is complete, we can go to all our PCs that are going to connect to the BarTender system database. Note that the first time or from the first PC that you connect to this legacy BarTender system database, you will get a warning about an update to the BarTender system database schema. So that is safe to do so, and go ahead and proceed with that upgrade. It is required. Your workflows will be brought in, as well as your logs, folders, and files from your previous librarian version. Remember that if this is not all local to the PC, the automation edition will not be able to connect to it, and you do need the enterprise license anyway for librarian. So we're going to open the administration to go about doing this. We're going to open the administration console in BarTender 2021. We're going to select the database option on the left-hand side. We're then going to click on the blue letters on the right that say System Database Wizard. You're going to want to select or opt in to connect to an existing system database, and using the SQL or Windows credentials that we previously configured and talked about, you're going to select by name the system database. A few things to know as we wrap up. Remember, you can always start a new fresh log. You don't have to migrate your system database over to get this functionality. Of course, if you're using Librarian, you likely do want to though. Note that you'll need to connect to the system database following the process mentioned on this slide on all your BarTender servers and PCs that you hope to give access to, not just log to the system database, right, but to have access to the global data fields that we talked about, and also the Librarian files and workflows. You can do that manually, or also you can build a silent install connection string and deploy it that way. Lastly, there's a lot of BarTender deployments out there. As I mentioned, each one is somewhat unique. If you feel you can't take this on your own, feel free to reach out to your BarTender reseller or directly to Siegel Scientific to work with our pro services team, which I'm a part of. We're here to help. And with that, thanks as always, everyone, and I hand it off back to Mike.
Awesome, thanks, Manny. That was a great look and deep dive into Librarian and BarTender 2021 and all the great tips and tricks on how to best upgrade. Well, I'm going to end our presentation today by quickly recapping the reasons why you should update to BarTender 2021, and then the next steps that you can take. And then also we'll, as mentioned, take questions at the end here. As mentioned, there are a couple major reasons to update to BarTender 2021. First, 10.1 is end of life in December 31st, the end of this year. You will no longer be able to get technical support for it. Windows or 10.1 is only compatible with an older version of Windows 10, and that PC, even though it's not connected to the internet, could be a security risk. So we definitely are encouraging you to upgrade before the end of this year. The second reason for updating BarTender 2021 is a whole bunch of new capabilities. As Manny sort of described, the new updated Librarian document management system is much faster. It's got higher performance, a number of new capabilities around workflow, and it has sort of the newest and exclusive to us visual workflow designer. Allows you to drag and drop states and transitions to very easily design new workflows. BarTender 2021 supports intelligent templates, which allows you to produce a wide variety of label and document designs without having to create hundreds of separate documents. We allow you to do PDFs without any third-party driver. And we've also made designing data entry forms in BarTender much more easier and more intuitive. We've added many new database connections, including support for over 20 different databases or data sources. And our powerful integration builder platform with BarTender 2021 allows you to easily work with your existing business systems, as well as new business systems. It supports several different trigger methods and data formats, including XML, TCP/IP, and over 70 different action types. And we also have our .NET SDK for even tighter integration. And with BarTender 2021, that .NET SDK includes support for all the new print portal and librarian and workflow functionality. The new print portal in BarTender 21 is another application that we've greatly improved the performance of, and it allows you the ability to print from any browser on any device. And as Manny described, it's fully integrated with librarian workflows. And finally, the new administration console replaces Security Center and consolidates a number of functions to make it much more easier to manage your entire BarTender installation. So what are the next steps to take? We recommend contacting your local partner reseller or us to see how you can update the BarTender 2021. You can also download BarTender 2021 on our website, siegelScientific.com. This includes a 30-day trial if you want to try it out first. If you need to renew your maintenance and support, you can contact our local partner reseller or us. Make sure to ask about our business stability and customer loyalty promotions for our maintenance and support packages. These promotions actually end at the end of the year as well. You can also access our customer portal to get an estimate or quote for your maintenance and support renewal. If you need extra technical assistance or help, our professional service team led by Manny on this call is also available. Many of our partner resellers also have technical staff available to help with the update if you need to. And finally, you can always visit the BarTender support site. We have support articles on updating the BarTender 2021 and a dedicated community section for updating from 10.1 to BarTender 2019, which still applies in terms of the tips, the videos, and documentation and technical documents that are available there. And finally, if you like this webinar and this whole entire series, we've been doing this 10.1 update webinar series starting in July this year. So we have our last one next month, which is all about our newest software release, BarTender 2021. So make sure you go to the link on the slide here to sign up for that last webinar. So at this time, thank you again, everyone, for attending and taking the time to learn about BarTender Librarian and BarTender 2021. So we'll start taking some questions now. So Stacy, can you take it away?
Awesome. Thanks, Mike, and thanks, Manny. So yeah, go ahead and submit your questions if you haven't done so already. And if we don't have time, or if your questions requires a little bit more technical expertise and a little bit more time to answer, we'll always follow up via email as well. But yeah, go ahead and submit your questions. And with that, I'll get into our first one that we have. And this question is, I would like to know if there are features on BarTender 2019 that are now on higher versions of 2021. For example, you can do X on version automation and now is only at, or now is only available for the enterprise editions.
Yeah, I can take that question. The answer is no. So in terms of moving from 2019 and 2021 and the different editions, the editions stay the same: starter, professional, automation, and enterprise. The features available in each edition in BarTender 2019 are still available in BarTender 2021. For BarTender 2021, you'll note, check out some of our documentation on our website. You'll note that there have been a bunch of new features that have been added to each of the different editions for BarTender 2021.
Awesome. And then our next question here, we are using BarTender 2016 R8. If we need to upgrade to R9, do we need to uninstall our old R8 and then reinstall R9? Also, do we need to activate the license for license server?
So if you're staying on the same version, you can just run the installer on top. And what the installer will do is it will recognize the previous patch or release of BarTender, and it will remove it and install the new patch.
Awesome. Next question we have, what is the easy way to determine the exact version of SQL Express installed with BarTender on any machine with a BT system database installed in order to be able to download the correct version of SQL Management Studio from Microsoft?
So BarTender is going to, it depends on the version that you're on, but you're likely going to be dealing with the Microsoft SQL Server 2014 instance of SQL Server Express. However, what version of Management Studio you get just has to be newer than that. There is backwards compatibility. So for example, like if I were to go do a upgrade for a customer later today, I would just install the latest version of SQL Server Management Studio. And because it's backwards compatible and can connect to an older version of SQL, you'd be fine to do so. So you shouldn't have to worry about that.
Awesome. And then another question we have, when opening a librarian workflow created in an older version, will it automatically display the flowchart diagram for the workflow and allow editing using the graphical tools?
Yes, so if you had a workflow in your previous version of your BarTender system database and you connect to it, the BarTender 2021 instance will recognize it and will effectively absorb that workflow, and you'll see it in your administration console. Once it's saved up to 2021, you can then either roll with it as is and as it functioned previously, or you can add some of the new functionality in the user interface. One thing to note though is remember that there was only one workflow previously supported, and now there's not really a limit on the number of workflows that you can run.
Awesome. And we did have a question come in asking, will this presentation be available for download? And yeah, we will have this presentation available on our website later today, and you'll receive an email with the recording and also the presentation slides. So, yeah. And it looks like we don't have any other questions. So if you didn't get a chance to submit, go ahead and submit right now. And with that, we'll follow up via email. And if you have any questions or concerns, feel free to reach out. And thank you for joining us today.
Thanks, everyone.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone.
Cheers. Goodbye.